From the halls of Montezuma, Kansas, that is, to wherever you may be, this is the Sure and Secure Podcast, a ministry of Morningside Community Church, helping you become sure that Christianity is true and that your salvation is secure through Jesus Christ. I'm Pastor Tim Erickson. Thanks for listening today. Social media today can tempt people to think that atheism is more common and more popular than it actually is. In reality, there is only a small percentage of people on earth who actually affirm atheism and believe that there really is no God. Even in some of the places where atheism is more common, it's only so because that viewpoint is enforced by the barrel of a gun. I'm thinking of places like communist China or North Korea or other places where communism holds sway. The truth is, the vast majority of people on earth today and the vast majority of people who have ever lived have believed in some kind of God. And the reason for that is very simple. It's because we can show, we can demonstrate, yes, we can even prove that God exists. That's what we'll focus on this episode of the podcast today. Recently, I've been talking through the contents of the book 12 Points That Show Christianity is True by Dr. Norman Geisler. This book is a very helpful, a very thorough framework for thinking about how we can demonstrate that the Christian faith is actually true, that it tells us the way it really is. It gives us the true story, not only of the present time, but of history and of the future as well. We have looked at the first 2 points in this framework, but let's review these quickly. Point number 1 was this: truth about reality is knowable. And in that episode, we saw how that claim is simply undeniable. It's undeniable that I exist. That's at least one thing that I know about reality. It's undeniable that the world I experience through my senses actually exists. So there's another thing that I know about reality. And my senses and my intellect allow me to explore this world around me so that I can come to know much more about it. One of the other things that we learn about reality is this, and this was point number 2. Opposites cannot both be true. Once I discover that a certain claim is true, I have discovered something about how reality actually is, because that's just what truth means, isn't it? It means telling it like it is. So I've discovered something about reality through that claim. And I know that anything that contradicts that claim or says the opposite of that claim has to be false. It cannot be true because it does not line up with reality. Now, one of the most important facts about reality is captured in the claim that we will consider today, and it's point number 3 of the 12 points, and it is this: it is true that the theistic God exists. It is true that the theistic God exists. Now, this point talks about the theistic God. Well, what does that mean? Well, it essentially envisions God as he was revealed in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, we see God clearly revealed as the creator of all things, the creator of human beings most significantly. He is eternal. He is unchanging. He is almighty. He is all-knowing. He is all-wise. And he is all good. So when we talk about the theistic God, that's essentially the picture of God that we have in mind. We're not focusing just yet on the fullness of how God is revealed in all of Scripture. Specifically, we're not yet focusing on aspects of God's reality, like the fact that He is a Trinity, or the fact that God is the Father of Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, we're not yet focusing on some of those details that are specific to Christianity. The reason for that is because in these 12 points, we're trying to move along baby step by baby step toward proving that all of Christianity is true. In other words, if you think about having a conversation with someone else about these things, someone who doesn't already agree with your Christian faith, the thought is that we're trying to invite this person to take one small step closer to the truth, and then another small step closer to the truth, and then yet one more small step closer to the truth. And so we're not making giant leaps in what we're trying to prove here. We're just trying to prove a little bit at a time. Now, I'll remind you here that this 12 points framework is just that. It's a framework. Remember, this is not a script for how you are supposed to speak to other people. And so in your conversations with others, this framework really would only need to be used once you have discovered that someone does not share your Christian faith, or that they're not ready to accept the Christian faith. You might speak to someone about your faith in Christ, and you might share the gospel with them, and you might discover that they're ready to trust in Jesus. Well, that's fantastic. In that case, all you need to discuss with them is the gospel, and you can point them to the scriptures that contain the gospel. But if you come to find out that they have some kind of objections to Christianity, then a framework like this 12 points framework can help you figure out which objections you might need to deal with first. You might discover that this person disagrees with you not only on the claim that the Bible is true, but he disagrees with you on the claim that we can know anything is true at all. Well, if you disagree on something that profound and that foundational, that's where you have to start as you try to sort through your disagreements with this person. And so that's what the 12 points framework teaches us. It teaches us a logical order in which we can discuss disagreements that another person might have with our Christian faith. Okay, well, let's discuss point number 3 here and how we know it is true that the theistic God exists. Now, in this chapter of the book, Dr. Geisler outlines 7 different lines of evidence, arguments for the existence of God. I'll just summarize 3 of them here rather briefly, and then I'll mention a 4th argument that Dr. Geisler didn't mention here in the chapter, but it's one that I kind of enjoy myself and I think might be a little bit memorable for you, and so I hope it might stick in your memory. But one of the arguments that Dr. Geisler notes is the moral argument. In other words, an argument for God's existence that's based on what we see and discover and know about morality in our world. Now, I did a more complete explanation of this argument in episode 6 of the podcast. So if you'd like to hear more about the moral argument in particular, you might go and find that episode. It's episode number 6. Go and listen to that. But essentially, the moral argument for God's existence can be summed up like this. We find in our world objective moral standards that each person is obligated to live by. And these standards truly are objective. They are the same for each person. It's not that I have to live by one set of moral standards while you get to live by a different set of moral standards. No, that's not true. That's not reality. These moral standards are objective. That also means that they're not standards that we as human beings simply made up. And so they're different from something like the speed limit on your local highway, for example. That speed limit was set by some governing body that had the authority to set the speed limit. And perhaps they set it at 70 miles per hour, but they could have set it at 71 or 69 or something like that. But they chose 70 miles per hour. And then if someday they decided to reconsider that, well, they would have the authority to change it. Maybe they could raise it or lower it. But these objective moral standards that we see, such as murder is wrong, these are not standards that we made up. They're not just the product of our opinion or imagination, and we don't have the authority then to change them. So these are objective moral standards. And they're standards we are obligated to live by. We feel guilty if we do not live by these standards, and we feel that guilt even if no one else knows about what we have done. And if anyone thinks that, oh, maybe these standards aren't obligatory on us, well, they betray that opinion very quickly when someone treats them badly. Anytime a person treats us badly, we react and we think, hey, they ought to have treated me better. They owed me better treatment and they didn't give it to me. And so we're naturally and understandably upset. So that just goes to show that we all understand that these standards really are obligatory on us. We ought to live by them. Now, the only being who could impose objective, obligatory moral standards on all of humanity is God. A God who created us, and thus we have obligations to him because we owe him our very lives. A God who is good, and that's why he requires us to be good as well. So, since objective moral standards do actually exist, then we know through that God actually exists. A second argument that Dr. Geisler mentions in this chapter is an argument from the beginning of the universe. This argument can be stated rather simply like this. Premise 1, whatever had a beginning had a beginner. Premise 2, the universe had a beginning. Conclusion, therefore, the universe had a beginner. Now, premise 1 is just based on the clear and obvious fact that if something began to exist, it could not have caused itself to begin to exist. Because before it began to exist, it didn't exist. And thus it didn't have any sort of powers or abilities whatsoever. So it couldn't have caused itself to begin to exist. Now, the second premise is a little more debatable to some people, although it's also widely acknowledged. The universe had a beginning. It's interesting to note that this is not only the declaration of Christianity. Obviously, Genesis 1:1 tells us, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But this observation is also the scientific consensus today, that the universe had a beginning. In the scientific community, that's often referred to as the Big Bang. Now, you don't even have to agree with everything that's said about the Big Bang in order to appreciate the fact that it shows us that the universe had a beginning. And if the universe had a beginning, then as this argument reveals, the universe had a beginner, a being who caused the universe to come into existence. But that observation also teaches us some things about that beginner, about that creator. For one thing, the creator cannot be made up of the same stuff that the universe is made of, because the creator caused all of that stuff, like atoms and other molecules, he caused all of that to begin to exist. So that shows us that the creator must be different from the universe that he created, in the sense that he can't be made up of things like atoms, and thus he's not made up of material stuff. So it shows us that the creator is not a physical being like we are, but he must be a spiritual being without a physical body like we have. It also shows us the immense power of this creator, in that he could cause all of the powers we see at work in the universe to begin to exist and to begin to perform their operations. It also shows us that this creator must be extremely intelligent in order to have devised all of these things that we see in existence around us and all of the intricate ways in which they work together. A third argument that is mentioned here in this chapter is an argument from the fine-tuning of the universe. As scientists have continued to make discoveries about our planet, about the human race, about our galaxy and our universe, they have discovered something that has shocked many in the scientific community. And that is that our universe is immensely fine-tuned to allow for human life to exist. In other words, there are many different factors that have been discovered that must be precisely what they are in order for human life to exist. For these factors, if they were slightly different from what they actually are, human life would not be possible on our planet. And yet these factors are precisely what they are, which shows us that our universe has been made to be a comfortable and hospitable home for human life. Astronomer Hugh Ross has noted over 100 such factors about the physical universe. And again, remember, we're talking about factors, maybe numerical values, numerical measurements of certain relationships, factors that have to be precisely what they are in order for human life to exist. Here are several that are listed here by Dr. Geisler in the book. Some of these might be not too hard for you to remember. One is this, that the sun is just the right distance from the earth to allow human life to exist here. If the sun was any closer to us, we would burn up. If it was any farther away from us, we would freeze. Our planet would not have the right range of temperatures for human life to exist. So the sun is just the right distance from the earth. Also, the tilt of the earth is just right to allow for human life. If it was any different than it is, it would get too cold at night, or it would get too hot during the day. Again, the range of temperatures would not allow humans to live here on the planet. Here's another factor. The force of gravity, the strength of gravity, is just right to allow movement to be possible on the Earth, but it's also just finely tuned to keep us from flying off into space. So the force of gravity, it's not too strong so that we can't move around, but it's strong enough to keep us in place here on our planet. Another one, the position of Jupiter in our solar system is just right to protect the Earth from being destroyed by things like comets and meteors and asteroids. Uh, Jupiter acts like something of a cosmic bodyguard for planet Earth. It takes a lot of the blows that might otherwise have come to Earth and put human life as we know it out of existence. Now, there are many other factors just like this that have to be precisely what they are in order for human life to exist here on the earth. And so, all of these factors together show us that our universe has been created specifically for human life to exist. There is just no way that all of these factors could have been perfectly calibrated by chance. It is just statistically impossible. And so this observation shows us that there must be a God, there must be a creator. Scientist Michael Behe has summarized this evidence very well. He says this, quote, "What we have is a planet in the right regions of a solar system, in the right region of a galaxy, in a universe with the right kind of laws to produce chemicals with the right kind of properties. This is all necessary for life, but still very far from sufficient. The planet itself has to be not too big and not too small, with enough but not too much water, the right kind of minerals in the right place. All are critical. If any one of them were missing, intelligent life would be impossible," unquote. It really is fascinating how these scientific observations have done so much to show us that there really is a God. You know, for many years, it's been common for people to think that science and the Christian faith are kind of at odds with each other. But in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Just today, I ran across this quote from a scientist named Werner Heisenberg. Now, he was kind of the founder of the branch of science known as quantum physics. And here's what he said about science and faith. Quote, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will make you an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you," unquote. I thought that quote was so appropriate and so fitting. I think what he means is that when people first start to grasp some of the amazing discoveries of the natural sciences, like biology and geology and physics and all of these things, people can start to get the idea in their minds that the universe explains itself, that we don't need to appeal to a belief in any God in order to explain why the universe does this or why it acts that way. But as people continue to discover more and more about the details of the universe, it is inescapable that there really is a God who created all things. Well, let me mention one more argument for you. This one is not included in the chapter by Dr. Geisler, but it's one that I have appreciated since I first learned about it, Now, it's a little bit more philosophical, but I think I can explain it to you clearly enough. And I have total confidence in you and in your ability to grasp it. Now, the nerdy, fancy technical name for this argument is the argument from the real distinction between essence and existence. Okay, now you don't need to remember that. Just in case anybody would want to look this up, do more study on it. That's the name. The argument from the real distinction between essence and existence. But I'm just going to call it the argument from unicorns. Okay, and maybe you can remember that. And here's why I call it that. Okay, think about a unicorn. Now, of course, a unicorn is not a real existing animal in our world, but the idea of a unicorn certainly exists, right? And the idea of a unicorn has a certain essence to it. What I mean by that is we can say things about the idea of a unicorn that are true and things that are false. So if I told you I was thinking about a unicorn and I described it as a yellowish animal with brown spots that had a 9 foot long neck, you would say, well, Tim, that's not a unicorn, that's a giraffe. And of course, you would be correct. A unicorn, the idea of a unicorn at least, does not have those traits, right? It has certain traits and not other traits. So that's what I mean when I say the idea of a unicorn has a certain essence to it. It is a certain way, and it's not other ways. It has certain traits, but not other traits. Now, of course, that essence of the idea of a unicorn doesn't have existence, does it? It doesn't exist as a real, tangible animal in the real world. If the essence of the idea of a unicorn were going to become real and have real existence, something else would have to give existence to its essence. Okay? And I trust you can understand that. So the idea of the unicorn does not have existence in its essence. It doesn't exist in the real world. If it was going to begin to exist in the real world, something else would have to cause it to begin to exist in the real world. Now, as we look at all of the things around us, we see a similar reality. That the essence of things like human beings, for example, our essence does not have existence as part of our essence. In other words, it's possible that we could not exist. Okay, there was a time when humanity did not exist at all. As God was creating the world, the world existed before human beings existed. And so it's possible for humans to not exist. That means it's not essential or it's not part of our essence that we have existence. Something else, someone else had to give existence to our essence. And of course, God is the one who did that. Now, if we think about all the beings that exist, it cannot be the case that we would have an endless chain stretching back of beings that all got their existence from somewhere else. Eventually, in order for all of us other beings to even exist, beings like us, human beings that had to get their existence from somewhere else, for any beings like us to exist, there has to be a being who has existence in his essence. In other words, a being about whom it is essential that he exist. In other words, that this being could not possibly not exist. Because without that being who has existence in his essence, all the rest of us who get our existence from somewhere else could not possibly exist. And so, who is this being who has existence as part of his essence? Well, this is none other than God. And this seems perhaps to be part of the reason why God described himself in the Bible as I am. That when he spoke his name to Moses in Exodus chapter 3, he said, I am who I am. Tell the Israelites that I am sent you to them. God is the existing one, the one who cannot possibly not exist, our Creator, the one who has made all things. And so, yes, it is true that the theistic God exists. There is a God. And as we continue to talk through the 12 points of this framework, we'll start to see all of the different observations that start to issue forth from the fact that there is a God who created all things, a God who is eternal and almighty and all good and all wise, a God who continues to be involved with his creation. And that continued involvement is the heart and soul of what we will see next in this framework. Well, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast again. If you're enjoying the Sure and Secure podcast, make sure to share it with someone else that you think might enjoy it, so that hopefully we can continue to pass along the blessing of knowing truth about this world that God created, and the blessing of becoming sure that Christianity is true and that our salvation is secure through Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to once again teach you something today, to the glory of God.